Hi, my name is Andrew Pa, and this is Artists at Work. I'm the new host, and today we are actually saying goodbye to Vincenza. She has been originally trained as a fashion illustrator, and for the past 10 plus years has been painting using oils, doing in plein air, as well as still life, correct?
Right, yeah, still life studio work.
Still, okay. Well, I kind of wanted to start with just some of your background. So when you originally trained as a fashion illustrator, what sparked your interest in that?
Well, you know, my family comes from a long line of dressmakers. So this idea of fashion has always kind of been in the narrative in my home with my mother and my father, and fashion and cloth and all kinds of things. And my dad used to bring me own cloth, and I used to design little dresses for my Barbie dolls. And but then I also had a natural bent toward drawing as well. My brother Pete gave me my first set of drawing pencils and sketch like board and paper. And that started that road. I think that when I was in high school, a lot of the kids' studio work wasn't something people did much. They didn't do, they used to call it fine arts, now they call it studio degree.
Okay.
So it was more, I leaned more toward commercial, and I knew I needed a job. So I thought, well, fashion illustration. But I graduated at a time when computers and artists, you know, illustrators were sort of, you know, it was this odd little time in the late 70s. So I did get a job. I designed appliques and embroideries for Health Techs, a kids store, kids clothing, and worked in New York City and worked in 7th Avenue. And for me, that was great. And so I sort of let my fashion illustration plans fall to the wayside. And then I got married and moved 3 times. But all that time, you know, I was sketching, I was drawing, I was dabbling all that time while I raised my family, my children.
Do you still have a lot of that fashion illustration work?
Yeah.
Do you ever go back to it at all? Do you ever bring up that skill anymore, or do you pretty much focus on painting?
You know, last year I had knee work done, and I was kind of couched for a couple of months, and I did take out my sketchbook and just sketched portraits, did some illustrations, just kind of got reacquainted with that again. But as soon as I could drag myself up to the studio to paint, I did.
Okay.
Because I missed oil painting.
Yeah.
I really loved that medium. And about 15 years ago, when family was raised and things were calming down, I wanted to paint.
Yeah.
So I began to look around. At that time, I was in Kentucky. And so I found a teacher to study with a little bit there. And
what was the teacher's name again?
Actually, that teacher, the first teacher, was a woman I studied with for a while, whose name right now escapes me. The one you're thinking of is my plein air teacher.
Oh, the plein air teacher,
who
right.
was also Kentuckian.
Right.
So once we moved here, I went to Cleveland Museum of Art. They also have classes, studied there for a little bit, started honing these skills, like how am I going to paint? You know, people talk about, oh, I want to paint, and we all just start slapping paint on canvas, and sometimes it looks like something, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it's tight, but I knew where I wanted to get. So eventually, I decided I wanted to paint plein air. I wanted to understand that. And by that time, my son was living in Lexington, Kentucky area, and there was an artist there who's still there, whose name is Bill Fletcher, who's giving a workshop for 5 days. I said, this is great. I could stay with, in the area and just go to these workshops every day. And he opened up a world to me that I didn't know existed. He limited my palette, which meant, a red, a yellow, and a blue, a white, and 2 grays, and that's all you have on there. He taught me about mother color, having one color, and then taking from that color, so you wind up painting on your canvas a harmony of colors, so like it makes sense. He taught me how to use my camera to see the darkest darks and the lightest lights, keeping in mind though, when you're using photography to paint from, the lights are too light and the darks are too dark. So when you take that photograph into your studio, you need to keep this in mind, so when you're painting, those darks aren't so dark and those lights aren't so light, and then it begins to look more natural. Mm-hmm. So he taught me all of these things. So shout out to Bill Fletcher, thank you.
Yeah, it sounds like a really fantastic experience.
It was amazing.
So you were there for 5 days.
5 days.
What, was it a kind of a different topic each day, or did he kind of just cover?
No, we were painting, well, he taught us like paint small, 5x7s. You don't need to go out with anything bigger because you're trying to collect information that you're seeing in that 1 hour. And to do it big, you've got to be very advanced to do it that size. So you're starting out, keep it small, get the composition, get the color notes, the values, the darkest darks, the lightest lights, the tone of the colors. Are they warm? Are they cool? Is it a cool green? Is it a warm green? An artist can talk about green for hours. 4 hours. Some take it out of the tube, some want to mix it. I like to mix my own, while others take out of the tube and mix with it. So there's a lot of philosophies around that. Whatever works for you, get to that green.
Yeah.
And so there, he taught me all of those things. It was a pretty intense 5 days. I came home to Ohio all fired up, like, okay, now I need to find a plein air group to paint with. So I, thank God for the internet, went online, and it was a plein air, Ohio, Cleveland area, and there are several groups. And these were people in the area that I painted with, and they were all added to that knowledge. They kept adding to that knowledge that I had first gotten from Fletcher. And I kept painting. And as I began to do that more and more, I got a little bit more confident. Things started looking like they made sense on the canvas. And you have a couple of breakout moments where you're like, oh, there it is. I got it.
Yeah, and I remember in our conversation last week that you said that you used to use that camera more often, but now you're able to much better capture that by just looking.
Right.
What was that experience like, really, when you actually got to start, when you went, oh, I know what I want this to look like. I know what the finished product will actually start to look like, and be able to really start to capture that with your own mind instead of
having to rely on the camera.
Instead of relying on that camera.
Sometimes the camera is just a nice way to find a view.
Yeah,
it's
I remember you saying that too.
I have other things that I use for viewfinders now. Of course, there's always the that thing. I never get that right.
This one?
Right, there it is.
The box.
The box. That's only been in the last year or so where I've just let the camera go. If I was there in that moment, I have photo references, but I also have that experience. Sometimes I'll even video the area just to remember the sounds I was listening to, the birds or the wind or whatever that was out there. I look at it mostly to get the composition, and then I try not to look at it again. And another thing, I took a class for perspective because I hate perspective. As a former illustrator, I should be okay with it, but I was never confident in it, and I'm still not confident in it. But I started to get more confident, and as time went on, I began to put buildings or structures in my paintings, and not worrying about, no one's going to use this to build a barn from. This, you know, like when you're an artist, you can get hung up, and then that makes the whole painting tight. And you want to feel loose. You want to capture a moment in time, and tightness is not probably what you want to capture. I think you probably you want to have a flow and a looseness in your performance. It's the same thing with an artist. You want it to look more natural, not that, I had my ruler out measuring, the 1/8 of an inch on this barn, But you still don't want it leaning like it's falling off. You want it set in the painting so people find it believable. And so there's all ways to get around that, but it is, you can trip yourself up as an artist there. I would imagine so. I would imagine actors would say the same thing. They're trying too hard in that moment, right?
If you're trying too hard, it really, I think in any art form, it really trips up what you're trying to achieve, which is expression and capturing a moment and really giving people a true vision of what you're trying to do.
And the emotion of it.
Yeah, the emotion of it. And I mean, right now, I'm doing a musical, and that, as I go through it, every show, it just gets easier.
Right.
Because, I know this music really well now. I can just, it becomes smoother, it becomes more authentic.
Yes.
And it really starts to blend in with what the actors are doing and what's happening with the rest of the orchestra.
It makes sense.
Yeah, it starts to really come together and really form that complete art that we always want to achieve, and like exactly what you said.
Yeah, we're getting there, and it's every day is a different day, and every day you approach it differently, and who knows whatever's going on in your life, right?
Yeah.
So this painting behind me, I have a little dog named Roxy, and I walk her, and I used to walk her through this neighborhood, which is directly behind me. And I would walk past this field every morning, and this particular morning it just blew me away how the light and the clouds were on there. So I snapped with my little iPhone some photographs and went right back and painted it that day, so while it was fresh in my memory, that moment. The sad thing about this field, it is no longer there. It has been developed.
Oh.
So I find with a lot of the fields that I've painted in and around where I live, they're being developed and the field is no longer there. And so, part of an artist's job is to document what's going on around them. Well, this field isn't there anymore. There's houses being built on it. But I loved the frost on that morning. It's called Frosted Morning.
Yeah.
All the dead matted down, and then the brightness on that.
Yeah,
far
that was
away.
something that really struck me when you first pulled out this painting this morning, was just the absolutely beautiful glow back there, and then the way the sky kind of goes up into that darker, and then you have this field. It's so, like, the colors just here really strike extremely strongly, and that was something I've noticed in a lot of actually your work in general, is that light. I really like the way you capture the light and how it strikes in the contrast. That really catches my eye, and as someone who dabbles in graphic design and things like that, where I do have to be a little bit more measured,
right,
of course, because I have to fit it within a certain page amount, but that's something I always try to do with things like that, is really capture that find places where I can use colors or other things to highlight things, to catch your eye, and then it brings you in, and then you can widen your field of vision as you look through it.
Exactly.
And that's something that really struck me about this one, because I like, when you go here, you have that beautiful light there, and then you have little catching here on the grass and on the frost, and I really enjoyed that about this painting.
Thank you.
And I'm glad you were able to capture this before they developed it.
It's funny. A hunter, a man I got to meet, who was a hunter, said, "This is exactly the way it looks in the morning when I go out hunting." He nailed it, and I was like, "Wow, that's great." This guy knows he's out there this time of the morning. I mean, it's pretty early in the morning, but now it's gone, and I no longer walk through that development. Took away my field.
They took away your field. Yeah, you take a different route probably to look at other.
Look at houses. And I think that's part of being a plein air artist and being an artist of landscape. Whether you're doing it plein air or doing it in your studio, when you're out, you should always be looking and observing. In the morning, I sit in my living room with the lights off, drinking my tea, looking out my back windows, because I have a line of windows, and that's where the sun comes up. Sunrises, and I just sit there just to watch how the light is going through the trees, how it's hitting the leaves right now. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
How the clouds look and the colors of the sky. You believe it or not, if you look there closely, sometimes I see a really super, super, super pale green in the sky. It's like, really, is that there? Yeah, it is.
It is there.
So, I think that's part of your job as being an artist, just kind of observing, and you just you look at life differently.
Absolutely.
Completely differently. I was at a blues show the other night, and this woman got up to play her bass guitar, and she was probably in her 30s. And I was fascinated by the way the light was shining on her face. I'm listening to the music, but I'm thinking, wow, what a life this lady must live. Look at her playing the bass. Look at the light on her face. I mean, this is all I could think about. So this is what artists think. Where my husband, who is more of a musician, he's thinking about every note that's being played, every movement of the guy's fingers. And so, you know, we all see life a little differently, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I dabble, I primarily a violinist and a musician, but I also try to dabble in other forms of art. You know, so I've done a little, you know, like mentioned graphic design, I try to do some photography as well.
Right.
And so when I'm looking at scenes, I frequently, and we talked about this last week, is the plethora of nature that's really available in Northeast Ohio.
It's amazing.
And it's, you know, it's great for photographers. I know I have a lot of photographer friends up in Cleveland, and they are constantly, you know, in Brecksville, in the Cuyahoga National Park, and they're all over the place, constantly taking pictures of people in the outdoors, animals, things out, you know, and there's just so much you can really see. And I know for, you know, in plein air, that's just, it's just so great. There's so many places you can go.
Yeah.
And even when you go back, and even if you were to revisit a location, it would look completely different.
It looks different.
I mean, I have, you know, when I take photos when I'm on hikes, that happens to me as well.
Right.
So that kind of leads me into that the project you did.
I did a project for 18 months, painting one farm for 18 months. I called it Farm to Canvas, and it was to highlight the farm to table movement that is going on right now in restaurants and should be in our homes.
Yes.
We should remember the food comes from a farm, not, you know, Giant Eagle. But I heard a chef speaking, Ben Beemanroth, who is the chef and owner of Spice Kitchen and Bar downtown in Gordon Square. I heard him speaking at a food demo thing and talking about acquiring this farm, and I realized that this farm was pretty much in my backyard. And so I wrote him and his wife and asked me, I come and paint your farm, and they said sure. And I said, well, can I come paint it for a year? And they said sure. They were very welcoming and very kind and generous to me. I knew that I could go there anytime, morning, noon, or night, and paint. And that was very exciting to not have to think about. You asked me, where do you go to paint? You know, how do you find you? Just drive around? Well, you know, for 18 months, I didn't have to think about
You
it,
didn't have to.
which was great because I could just show up there. And that was the first year he had the farm, and now it looks really completely different. So it was supposed to be a year. It spilled over to 18 months, and every now and again, I still show up there. They have these wonderful dinners called Planet Landscapes. There's a painting behind me called Evening. I think it's directly behind me. And Evening was painted during a Planet Landscape. So if you have an opportunity, the Spice Acres hosts these dinners where you go and have wonderful cocktails and wine and hors d'oeuvres on the farm side. And Ben and his team give a tour of the farm. And it's educational, and you really learn about what's going on there, what it takes to run that kind of farm. And then afterward, you walk across the street and you have a dinner in their barn. So as part of that, I would show up with my easel to paint during the hors d'oeuvres portion of it. And I painted Evening behind me. And the sun was setting and the light was perfect, and you get to meet people and talk about it, and hopefully people understand the importance of it all. Let me see what I have here. I have this painting, which is from Spice Acres. This is called Cherry Blossoms, Hope of Spring. And the reason I called it this is because Ben called me that morning and he said, Ben, you got to come and see what this looks like. This cherry tree is just beautiful. So I quickly, you know, it was like March. It wasn't winter. It was like March, the middle, maybe end of March even. And I ran over there and snapped away, but the sky was so full of moisture and the air was so cold. By the time I got home, it started snowing.
Oh, okay.
So if I had not done that, I would have missed these beautiful cherry blossoms.
Yes.
In that afternoon, I painted this painting because I just wanted to capture that. And this just really just speaks to the Ohio's fickle weather patterns.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Pick a day, you know?
That's
Last week it was 70, today it's 40. Okay.
today it's 40, and we we had a thunderstorm the other night.
Right,
with downed power lines, and now we have this
winter. And it'll probably snow this weekend. So
Probably.
Ben called me up and said, "You're texting me. You got to come and you got to come and see that," which was also another place I like to paint a lot is the by Everett Covered Bridge.
Yeah, I remember you mentioned that.
And this is called Riverbed Morning. This is 24 by 12. And this was wasn't really spring, but it wasn't winter anymore either.
It kind of looks maybe around April-ish?
Yeah, it's desolate and dry. The bed is dry. There's no water. We haven't had a lot of rain yet.
Yeah.
But this was painted in my studio, but from a photograph. But I really like the way this came out. It kind of, you sense that it's in between seasons.
Yeah, and
not spring, not winter.
And the way that I can kind of, just looking at it myself, the way it looks, the Ohio sky, when you're transitioning seasons, has this sort of murkiness to the sky, because the clouds and the color of the sky is a little bit different than during the summer versus winter.
Right.
Winter, you kind of get that more icy blue color. During the summer, you get a little bit more pale blue. And then during the winter, and when it's transitioning between autumn and spring, you kind of get a lot more variance in the sky to me. And that's something that really struck me when I moved out here 5 years ago, was you could almost tell what season it is based on the sky. And when you see like the trees and the way things look against the sky, it looks so different from during the summer. And I think some of that's from that moisture. The moisture in the air, it changes how the sky looks.
I think so too.
And that's really apparent to me in this one, that sky, because I can see different hints of different colors, and that I think it really captures that transition of the season well.
Yeah, this is one of my favorites actually. So. And that you're talking about that blue of the winter, that blue in that sky on the barn. That's also in the same area. That's also Everett Covered Bridge.
Okay.
I think that's Peninsula. I think that's considered Peninsula. And I've painted there.
I think that's right, yeah.
I've painted there quite a bit, quite a few times. And that's a favorite haunt for many plein air artists to go to. There's always somebody down there painting or shooting it.
Yeah, and I remember during our conversation you mentioned that when you used to go out with, these groups would actually help you when you first started kind of scout out areas. They'd have areas selected and you'd go as a group.
Which was always nice.
Which was always nice. And that, started to really increase your familiarity, I'm sure, with locations that you could go to.
As a transplant to Ohio, I didn't know about any of these parks. And a lot of the folks that I was painting with have lived here either all their lives or they've lived here for a very long time. And so they would say, oh, no, we're going to meet at, here, we're going to meet over there. Well, okay, sure.
Did you ever get lost when you were looking for these areas?
Yeah, plenty of times. Thank God for, your GPS on your phone. And
absolutely.
God bless them. They'd always try to give me directions. Just give me an address. But this painting behind me, called Wrap for Winter, is one of my favorite paintings.
Yeah, you were telling us the story.
This is actually behind my house. The gentleman who owns this house planted a line of fir trees, and he's created a beautiful backyard for his family, and I really love the way he's done that. But the first winter he planted them, we had terrible winter, and these trees took a beating. So the second winter he decided, all right, I'm going to wrap everybody up here and hope for the best. Of course, we had a mild winter that year, but the minute he was out there wrapping those trees with the person who was helping him, I was like, oh, I can't wait to paint these. I was fascinated by their shape, by the idea of the wrapping around these trees to protect them. And it became a spiritual thought for me of what do we wrap ourselves in to protect ourselves in. This man was careful about his yard and his family and his trees, and that got me thinking about what do we do? What do we wrap? What is our faith? What is our touchstone that keeps us okay? And I know what that is for me. It's my faith in God, And this tree sort of reflects that. This painting rather reflects that for me.
Yeah.
I love that morning, that particular morning when I went out to shoot. That light was just so peachy. The sky was so peachy.
Yeah.
And this was a light snow, but I was so excited about it. Like, oh, we have snow. Quick, let me go out there. And it probably was like 3 inches. It wasn't a lot.
Yeah.
But the way the snow was nicely hanging on the trees and hanging on the trees behind it, but also on the burlap that's on it.
Yeah.
They do sort of look like mummies, and I know that for some people, they look at it like, what is that? I know it's not a subject matter that everybody will understand or love, but for me, it was important.
Yeah.
And so for me, that was an important painting that I enjoyed.
Yeah,
painting.
and again,
loved every minute of it. It's one of
Yeah.
those things that I loved every minute painting it.
yeah, and the thing, I actually remember seeing this, I believe it was on your blog. I think you had this up, or I saw it somewhere. And when I saw it originally, my first thought was, what is that? Because I was looking at a computer screen, so
Right,
it was
yeah.
kind of small, so it was hard to tell. I was like, what is that? But then, once my eyes adjusted to the size, I really saw that. And the sky, as you mentioned, was very peachy, and that really caught my attention. And then the way you captured that same kind of color throughout on the snow reflecting, that's really what stands out when I didn't know this backstory behind it.
Right.
It's the way you captured the color of the sky and how you really got that in the snow as well.
Well, I've been looking at those trees now for 12 years. The
Yeah.
light coming through those trees for 12 years.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of excited about
Yeah.
capturing all of that. And I love painting snow. Painting snow is tons of fun for
I'm
me.
sure it's really fascinating
It is.
because it always shows a different reflection, and different kinds of snow I'm sure look different. So when it's that heavier, more moisture-ridden snow, it probably looks a little different and reflects light differently
Right.
than when you get that light, fluffy snow that usually
Yep.
kind of comes in January and February.
Yes, exactly. So it's painting snow is a lot of fun. It's standing out in the snow, not that much fun, but I have done it. So you put those hunter heating things on all over your body, and you just stand out there and paint.
Yeah.
And those are really small paintings. you're out of there in an hour.
You don't want to be there too long.
Yeah, you're out of there in an hour and a half. You're done. We're done.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, we're almost coming to the end here. I just wanted to ask you, you've been doing this for 3 years. And during that time, has that started to really, I know you've met with a lot of different artists, has that
Yes.
really started to, throughout, kind of change the way you have viewed your own work?
Yep.
And, have you adapted some practices from maybe some other artists that you've had conversations with?
I can't put my finger on any particular practice that I've adopted, but I've certainly met a lot of artists in Cleveland. It certainly has given me appreciation for the way art is done by other artists, how they see it. I'm obviously a very traditional artist, but I've interviewed people that have not necessarily been as traditional, and I've learned from that how, wow, their mind's eye and what they're seeing and why this looks this way on the canvas. And so, yes, it's been very exciting. It was a privilege to be the host of this show and to meet all these different artists, their history, understand the history of Cleveland art, and all that goes on here is amazing.
And we didn't even get a touch on that, but there's just so much art that goes on with the Cleveland Art Museum, the Museum of Contemporary Art, the Akron Art Museum. And then all the independent galleries that are in the area, like Group 10 down in Kent and other galleries that are around. And there's just such a plethora of art really here, in addition to the nature that you routinely capture in your artwork.
Yes.
Well, it's been a pleasure speaking with you
you.
today, and thank you so much for being here, and thank you for
You're
being the
welcome.
host for the last 3 years. And I'm honored to be taking the reins for now.
You got it.
So I'm really excited to start bringing the stories of artists from this area, and hopefully some from beyond as we move forward.
Great.
So in closing, thank you for joining us here at Artists at Work. And what would I know you say this on the air, but let's stick with tradition. What's your 6-word memoir?
My 6-word memoir is painting the world that's before me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us.